Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. It is about 12:28 on a Friday. Pretty beautiful, sunny, pretty much summer. We're just a couple of weeks short of the actual start to the summer season. So I hope everyone's doing good. So yeah, it's been pretty nice. The weather has been pretty fabulous. So yeah, and I've been watching some great movies. Just finished up. I've also been in the midst of finishing up a really fabulous TV show that I'm going to talk about when eventually. I think we only have a few more episodes to watch, but I want to do a big thing on that when that's all done. Really great show. So today's show is actually on a movie that is, well, a pretty old film, and that is James Cameron's The Abyss. I was we were going to watch it a few weeks ago, or actually last week, but then some things came up and we weren't able to watch it. So today I just decided to do a show on it where I talked about it and kind of reminisced about what the movie meant when I first saw it, and then just recently I watched it again because it was one of those things. Like every now and then you get these, real big cravings to want to watch a film. Kind of like when you're sitting around one day or night and you have this real intense craving to watch or to listen to, say, a particular album from a band that you really love or some kind of artist. It's one of those things. So I decided we didn't get a chance to really to watch it. So then the other night I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna get it, and that's what I did. So I had not seen The Abyss in a very very long time, and of course The Abyss was directed by James Cameron. It came out in 1989, which is pretty wild. There's there were two versions of the film. I remember there was like a lot of the times with there's a few James Cameron films of where there's like extended editions or director's cuts, and then there's like a theatrical version where typically the theatrical version is kind of trimmed down for like the length. A lot of James Cameron's films are on the lengthier side, so most notably probably Avatar, the Avatar films, but there's always a there seems to be these different versions of his films. Most notably, I would say, is probably Aliens, which I feel, for my money, is the greatest, sequel to the masterpiece that is Ridley Scott's masterwork Alien from 1979. There's a director's cut for that film that is for Aliens, the James Cameron sequel, which is I think about 20 minutes longer. It's very very different. I love the theatrical version, but I have to say the director's cut is the best. And so there's also, which I recently acquired, a director's cut of Avatar. I don't believe I've done a show. I haven't done a show on it yet, but I bought actually a special edition of Avatar on Blu-ray quite a few months ago. I got it at Goodwill. I like that movie, but then there are certain things about that movie that I am kind of always disappointed with. But visually it's pretty amazing, and from a technological standpoint, there are some prime-time examples of like true innovation as far as in the craft, the art form of filmmaking. I think a lot of those things are kind of true with The Abyss. The Abyss, came out in 1989. There are two versions of that. There was the original theatrical version, which came out when the film was initially released. I remember seeing The Abyss. I think I saw it in the theater when I was a kid. I was probably, I was like 13, 12 or 13, and I've seen The Abyss quite a few times, and I'm pretty sure I saw it in the theater. I've seen it quite a few times on DVD. I've seen it numerous times. I mean, it was one of those movies that was. similar to the Terminator, which I also feel my two favorite Cameron movies are is definitely Aliens and then the Terminator. But he's made some great films. But sometimes, there's certain things. I think, well, for example, the Terminator and Aliens. Like, if you watch those now, and again, this is just a matter of opinion. You watch those films now, there is nothing about them that gives you a feeling, gives me a feeling of wow, this is kind of dated, or this this doesn't really hold up as well because it's 20 or 30 years old now. 20 you watch it 20 or 30 years after it came out. There's never a moment with those films where you're like, this is a little bit dated and this is a little bit cheesy, but not for the good reasons. Maybe for the bad reasons, like some of the dialogue or some of the way the writing is, or even some of the effects just are not strong anymore. Some things, obviously, like fine wine, great films, great masterpieces. At least in my experience, they age well, and as you grow up and a certain film stays with you, it can mean many different things for you and can be timeless, a timeless experience. I love those films that have that real dated quality, but mostly in the realm of the exploitation, obviously, because again, it's a case of like it's so bad it's good. And that's an entirely different kind of well, an entirely different style or art form, if you will. So I watched The Abyss, and there's a director's cut, and I remember there was a director's cut that came out. Geez, it's been out for quite a long time. There's this big extended version of The Abyss that I believe is there's a difference between the two versions of about maybe 15 minutes or so, kind of similar to Aliens. Um, with Avatar, there is about 15 minutes difference. I do prefer the the Avatar version. Typically, overall, not just this movie or these films, I typically, if there is a director's version or director's cut of a film that I really love, or of a film that I've just discovered, I will usually that version will usually be my go-to. That will usually be my will always tend to be my favorite version of that film. Kind of this like definitive thing. So it's interesting. It's interesting that always happens. And like when it comes to movies that I love that happen to be foreign films, when there's a version of that film of where you can get it in its original native language for that I tend to always love that version more than say the American version. And The Abyss, I have to say, like I watched it the other night, and I think it's still a great movie. Like it's interesting. I had a lot of things about it that were a lot of things I felt around the film were was a little bit dated and a little bit well cheesy, if you will. Not necessarily in the best, well, in a good way. Because I love me some real cheesy movies. I really do. I tend to love movies that a lot of people hate, especially when it comes to the exploitation world. But there were there's moments of when a movie doesn't hold up as well, of where it's like kind of unwatchable and kind of terrible. Two examples of that would be, say, Vin Diesel's Pitch Black. I love that movie when it kind of came out, and I watched it like the last couple of years, and I couldn't get through it. It was so bad. The CGI, the really bad computer generated. It wasn't even CGI. It predated that, but the really bad computer generated images around the kind of the creation of that film made that movie look really, really bad. And I couldn't make it all the way through, and it was just really cringeworthy at times, even the dialogue. So that's a factor. That's an example of it not aging well. And another movie which I always thought was entertaining, never a great film per se, and it always reminded me of Raiders of the Lost Ark or the Indiana Jones films, and that is Brendan Fraser's The Mummy. You know, entertaining, not a great movie. Um, could have been a little bit better, but I always kind of love that movie to a degree. But I watched that again recently, well, the last couple of years, and I bought it because I bought that on Blu-ray, and I thought that movie was I couldn't make it all the way through. I thought it was terrible. It was dated in all the worst ways you can imagine. The dialogue and especially the CGI in that film is just an atrocity, and it really shows. It rears its ugly head in basically virtually every scene that's used that where it's used in that movie, which is almost every scene. So, but The Abyss holds up quite a bit better. It's not as bad as that, but it's still a great film. It's still something I recommend. But there are definitely things about the film where I was just like, oh god, like there are some really generic and examples of real of some really bad writing. But I'm a little bit torn about it too. I Because I think this movie is it's a real thrilling action movie. It's a sci-fi movie first and foremost. James Cameron did was at that time, like a lot of his films, he was inventing technology at the same time of when he was actually shooting this movie. A lot of these cameras, about 90% of this film or more was shot underwater, and so there was no technology at that time. So James Cameron basically invented all of these new forms of technology to be able to film this, to create his vision. So from that standpoint, I mean, pretty innovative. He did the same thing, obviously, with Avatar. So you have to give props where props are due. But I also feel like there's certain things around the dialogue and kind of the cliched characterizations that are in the movie that are a little bit bad and kind of cheesy and a little bit terrible. But I still think The Abyss is a great action adventure movie. It's got romance. It's got really great action. I think Michael Biehn is phenomenal in this movie. Of course, Ed Harris, so great character actor. Um, some of the action sequences are tremendous. I think the story is actually really good. It's it has two or three stories kind of working together, but it's pretty well done. Visually, it's pretty amazing. I did watch it again. I watched it, The Abyss, the other night on a DVD copy, and I have to say the quality of the DVD, it was not very good. It was weird because the movie is very long. It's a very long movie. I forgot how long of a movie it is, and I got all the way through it, but I forgot how long it is, and it was a case of where it was kind of a case of where I felt like it dragged a little bit. But the quality, it was weird. The quality got better, which is odd. But I felt like the first hour of the movie, it looked kind of rough. Like it looked just bad. It was like a bad DVD copy. And then it seemed to have gotten better. It would be great to see this on Blu-ray. I don't own it on Blu-ray. I've never seen it on Blu-ray. I might eventually buy it on Blu-ray. Um, so it was odd. It does. I think it was probably a case of where I just my senses kind of adjusted to what was going on. And you know, but I'd say, and granted, it's a tough thing. The one thing I will say is there's a whole like James Cameron has lots of kind of political, you know, well, not political. I wouldn't say, but he definitely has an environmental message in a lot of his films. Avatar obviously he has social commentary in a lot of his films, but I think The Abyss, it obviously with Avatar, but the Abyss is like, especially the director's cut, especially the ending. That that kind of agenda is so obvious and it's so heavy-handed. Even though I agree with him, I agree that people, the corporatization of our world is horrible, and what that has caused. But I still like, if I'm gonna be assaulted with that idea, that concept, with something I completely agree with, and I'm gonna be like hit over the head with it, it turns me off. I've talked about that a lot about certain films, movies that have, even if it's something politically I completely feel aligned with, which 90% of the time, if not more, I do, but I want to be able to enjoy the film, and the story and the film itself should be at the end of the day, the lasting power of what the whole experience is. You can have your social commentary about various, say, causes that you believe in weaved in the movie, but when the movie kind of becomes that cause or that agenda, even if I completely agree with it, it for me it takes away from the story, and suddenly I'm just like, I feel like I'm being preached to and told, and I feel like I'm being told what I should believe in to become a good citizen. And when that happens, I immediately shut down. There is a movie that came out a few years back with DiCaprio and I think Meryl Streep, called Don't Look Up, which was a very cool movie, a very interesting movie, kind of a comedic movie about this coming environmental disaster. And again, obviously, a very deep political movie about climate change. Essentially, is what it is. But I felt like, even though I pretty much 100% agree or align myself with that opinion or those opinions that that film shares, I felt that movie was so heavy-handed and so preachy that it turned me off, and it made me never want to see the movie again because it kind of encroached on the actual storytelling. So it's a fine line, it's a fine line of because when things become preachy and there is an obvious agenda, I even again, if I come, it doesn't matter. It's not a case of I agree with it or don't agree with it. Once that encroaches on my experience, I just shut down. So I can't really watch that movie anymore, and it kind of took me out of the movie. And I have to say, the director's cut of The Abyss kind of has that same agenda. Again, dealing with the environment and the environmental catastrophes that the human race can cause, has caused, and is causing, which again, I completely agree with. But the film gets to a point, especially the ending, of where honestly I feel the film is, by the end of the film, I got the feeling that it's purely a springboard for James Cameron James Cameron's political or beliefs around the environment and about humanity, and what we have done through pollution and through corruption. It's too much. It took me completely out of the movie. Not to the point I would say that Don't Look Up did, but I still think this movie is still watchable. I still think it's great. It would still be something I would recommend. Um, and again, I try not to when I watch a movie. I try not to get well overly analytical about things. I try to just like enjoy the movie for what it is. I try to go into it with an open kind of canvas. Well, this was a different experience because this is a movie I've seen many times, but I had not watched it I hadn't actually seen The Abyss in quite a few years, probably 10 years. So, but I still try to go into it cold, and I try to do that with every movie. It's harder to do that, I think, with newer movies nowadays because of trailers that are giving away the entire plot of that particular movie, and you can learn everything and anything about a particular film before it's even come out. So it's a different day and age that way. But I will say this movie is still great. The Abyss is still a great film, but there are certain things that make it a little bit dated, but in the wrong, not in the cool ways. Particularly around some of the writing and the heavy-handed take on social, and socio-political, and mainly around the environment. James Cameron's opinions on the environment. There's clearly an agenda, and it's a little bit like, oh my god, and it's super cheesy, and it's this. There's also this thing about the movie where it's clearly. I mean, the more and more I kind of criticize it, it probably sounds like I didn't really like this film. I do, but there's also a thing around this movie where it feels like it was so curated for families. It was so curated to make money, and it's got to have like to a degree a paint by numbers film that can be embraced by everyone. It feels like it has that um, all of those key points to be able to make you know to bring James Cameron the box office gold. So it has that factor, which I feel again. You watch Aliens or you watch The Terminator, and there is like none of that. They're just incredible films, especially Aliens. Like it's just balls to the wall. It's you don't get any of that at all. There's nothing dated about it. There's no agenda. There's no, well, let's try to make this movie for the soccer moms who have 5 kids at home. Let's make a movie for an entire family of you know from the parents to the grandparents and all of the kids, that they can all go and eat their popcorn and just consume this movie. There's none of that feeling, and definitely The Abyss is. I feel like it's very curated for that kind of audience. So it is a different. It's a very different thing. It's a very different, and I know it's a different kind of a movie, but still. But I still would recommend it. I would love. I would love to. I would still love to see this on Blu-ray someday, because the quality of this movie on DVD was not very good. It did get better in its own odd, weird way, but so it does. It is still a great film. Michael Biehn is just fantastic in it. He of course was in Aliens, and also Terminator. He's always been one of my favorite actors. Ed Harris is fantastic in it, but so yeah, a little bit of a mixed bag. Still a great film, but kind of a mixed bag. kind of a mixed bag. So this is Jason Dean, and we will see you next time. Peace.